All right, how's everybody doing today? Hotep, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. It is Thursday, July 18th, 2024, and we are live. So I wanted to do a preview of this new 10-week online course that I teach, Black Resistance Movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. Black Resistance Movements, 1492 to 1968. Christopher Columbus, Haitian Revolution, Black Power Movement, how Black people fought against white supremacy, how Black people fought against white supremacy. All right, so give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a heart on this broadcast. I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. So this is a fantastic 10-week online course that I teach. And one of the things that we look at are the various ways that African Americans fought back against white supremacy and racism. Okay, the various ways that we fought back against white supremacy and racism. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for this 10-week online course there. Now, this course looks at the different ways that Black people, people of African descent, as well as African Americans, fought back against racism and white supremacy between 1492 to 1968. Between 1492 to 1968. Your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. We'll analyze history, especially U.S. history, primarily from the African American perspective, beginning in 1492 with the Moors losing control of their last stronghold, Granada, January 2nd, 1492 to Spain, and Christopher Columbus sailing on his first of 4 voyages when he set sail August 3rd, 1492 on the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. And we're going to see that the day before Columbus set sail, August 3rd, 1492, we know that Spain expelled the Sephardim, the Sephardic Jews, on August 2nd, 1492. Okay, so all this takes place in 1492. Now, Christopher Columbus helps to lay the foundation of slavery, racism, capitalism, and the exploitation of African people and Native Americans. We'll look at the Louisiana Purchase, the Haitian Revolution, the 1791 to 1804, because those two events are related. Okay, those two events are related, and and the reason why Christopher Columbus is so important, right, is because the island nation of Haiti is on the island that he lands on December 6, 1492, that he calls La Isla Española, which means the Spanish island. And that western third of the island where Haiti is, that was first a Spanish colony conquered by Columbus. And the Spanish colony was called Santo Domingo. And that western third of the island is going to become a French colony in 1697. And the French are going to call it Saint Domingue. And that is where Haiti or Haiti is. And that's where you're going to have the Haitian Revolution. Okay, so we see what Christopher Columbus sets in motion. Okay, and we see this connection, this chronology of history, and that goes back to the African Moors going into the Iberian Peninsula in 711 AD, what today we call Spain and Portugal, defeating the Vandals and the Visigoths, settling in southern Spain, going all across Europe, and taking the teachings from the Nile Valley region of Africa into Europe. And it's going to be these teachings that bring Europe out of the Dark Ages. And they're going to introduce spherical globes, different navigational instruments as well, periodic tables, science, mathematics, arts, architecture, all different types of foods, all of this. Everything we taught Europeans during this period of time, during this 800-year period of time, 711 to 1492, everything we taught them came back to kick us in the behind. So we're going to see how all this history is connected. And we can trace the history back, like I said, to the Moors going in 711 AD. But so we'll look at the Haitian Revolution, the Louisiana Purchase, and the Louisiana Purchase doubles the territory of the U.S. They're going to cover about 15 states out of the land they get from the Louisiana Purchase, 828,000 square miles of land. And we'll look at the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which organizes the land that the U.S. gets from France. And it allows, the Missouri Compromise allows Maine to come in as a free state, allows Missouri to come in as a slaveholding state, and it abolishes slavery in the West, in the rest of that territory. Okay, the Missouri Compromise. Now, we'll look at Special Field Order number 15, also known as 40 Acres and a Mule. We'll look at General Order number 3, which deals with what we call Juneteenth. General Order number 3, Major General Gordon Granger delivers General Order number 3 in Galveston, Texas, June 19th, 1865. And, you know, we just commemorated and celebrated Juneteenth, but Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery. Okay, because the Emancipation Proclamation did not free the slaves. We know it was the 13th Amendment that was ratified December 6, 1865, and adopted December 18th, 1865. And Kentucky and Delaware did not abolish slavery until December 18th, 1865. This is when Kentucky and Delaware abolished slavery. Okay, so this is 6 months after this is 6 months after Juneteenth. Okay, this is 6 months after June 19th, 1865. So how could Juneteenth be the last day of slavery? Yes, it's important to commemorate that history. Yes, it's important to celebrate. But as I talk about in my Juneteenth presentations, we have to correct the history of Juneteenth and protect the history of Juneteenth. Okay, so we have to correct the misinformation that's out here. And it's okay to have celebrations, but when we have these celebrations of Juneteenth, we have to incorporate into these celebrations history, economics, law, and politics. History, economics, law, and politics. And one of the reasons why it's important to commemorate and celebrate Juneteenth is because Juneteenth allows us to force into a national conversation a history that various states are passing laws to passing laws to suppress the history of that teaching, okay, and suppress the teaching of that history. So this gives us an opportunity to correct a lot of the misinformation that's out here. All right, so we go through and look at a lot of this history chronologically and look at various ways that African Americans fought back against white supremacy and racism. There was armed resistance. We fought back economically by using the cooperative system of cooperative economics, whether it was the Free African Society of 1787, whether it was the Colored Merchants Association in 1928, whether it was the Colored Farmers Union in the 1880s that starts in Texas and grows to 1.2 million members. Okay, whether we fought in the courts with lawsuits, Smith versus Allwright, 1948, which was 1944, which is fighting against the all-white primaries that Democrats were having in Texas, whether it's Brown versus Board of Education, whether it's Gomillion versus Lightfoot, 1957, U.S. Supreme Court case, 1960, U.S. Supreme Court case, Gomillion versus Lightfoot, that stemmed from the state legislature in Alabama redrawing the district lines of Tuskegee, Alabama, to try to lock out almost all of the African Americans there in Tuskegee, to redraw these district lines to suppress the African American vote. Okay, and this was at a time when they're operating under the Alabama State Constitution in 1901, which was imposed to impose segregation. Okay, Alabama State Constitution in 1901, and they imposed. It was designed to solidify white supremacy. Okay, it was designed to solidify white supremacy, codify white supremacy. If you look at Encyclopedia of Alabama, okay, and the Alabama State Constitution of 1901. and I'm going to pull this up here. This is one of the things we look at here in the class. Is that Encyclopedia of Alabama? Encyclopediaofalabama.org right here. Let's look at this. Okay, Encyclopediaofalabama.org, Alabama Constitution 1901. Written primarily to codify white supremacy by disfranchising African Americans, by disfranchising blacks. The Constitution of 1901 continues to shape Alabama politics in the 21st century. The Constitution also concentrated power in the state legislature, decreased opportunities for home rule, and established voter requirements that even many white men could not meet, reducing the political influence of the state's many poor whites. The political developments that led to the Constitution of 1901 originated in the post-Civil War Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877. The Republican-controlled U.S. Congress abolished slavery under the 13th Amendment, granted citizenship to former slaves under the 14th Amendment, and guaranteed them the right to vote with the 15th Amendment of 1870. Congress forced the ex-Confederate states to pass constitutions that further articulated these rights for former slaves. When Alabama's Democratic Party regained control of the state government in the election of 1874, one of its first actions was to overturn Alabama's Reconstruction Constitution of 1868, which had expanded voting rights among African Americans and poor whites. And one of the things, when you study the Alabama state constitution, that Reconstruction Constitution of 1868, one of the things that it does is it creates the first publicly funded, the first state-funded public education system in the South, and it was an integrated public education system where African American children were educated right next to white children. Okay, this is under that Reconstruction Constitution of 1868 in Alabama. All right, but when the white supremacists take back control of the state legislature in 1874, they're going to overturn the Alabama Reconstruction Constitution of 1868. So this plays a huge part in the politics that we see in this country today, especially in the southern states, especially in these former Confederate states. Okay, so this is the type of information that we get into in this class. This is a deep, deep history. And your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history. Okay, now, if we go back, now these are some of the slides that I'm going to show you. These are some of the slides from my actual class, okay? And I put together this class. This is the second course that I teach. The first course that I teach is called Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, and that's a 10-week online history course that I teach as well. We deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com to register for these classes. And we have our next class is Sunday, July 21st. Okay, so if you go to our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, scroll down the page, we have the information right at the top of the page. Black resistance movements, Christopher Columbus, the Haitian Revolution, and the Black Power Movement, 1492 to 1968. Next class, July 21st, 2024, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Class is on sale right now, $80, regularly $130. Click right here to register here for the full course. You can join us live for the class or watch classes on demand. Okay, join us live for the class or watch classes on demand. Click right here for a course bundle, so because you'll get both classes, which includes the first course that I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. And we have class number 1 starting up Saturday, July 20th, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, of Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, where they did teach you at school. So that class is on sale, $80 also. All right. And this content is PG-13. You can use this information with your children as well. Okay. All right, let's continue here. So it's not overly graphic. I don't do a lot of cursing. It's very visual. We have slides, video clips, excerpts from books, and we show you the information right on the screen. And it's about 80 to 100 articles that we reference in each class also. Okay, so we'll look at the Civil War era, Jim Crow era, World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power movement. We'll look at the Red Summer of 1919, where you have 25 major race riots across the country. It was called the Red Summer by James Weldon Johnson. James Weldon Johnson also wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing, the Black National Anthem. And he called it the Red Summer because he said the streets of America were flowing with blood. The streets of America were flowing with blood. Let's see here. Let's continue. Okay. So it's important to understand this chronology of history to get a better understanding of how we got to where we are today and to understand where we need to go from here. Unfortunately, some of this history is repeating itself. When we look at the January 6, 2021 insurrection, right? There's a historical context for this because that was political violence. And for a lot of historians, and myself included, it was reminiscent of the political violence that we saw that brought about an end to the Reconstruction era, which was 1865 to 1877. There was a really good article from Time magazine that talks about, that draws a connection between the January 6, 2021 insurrection and the Reconstruction era. And it deals with how the history of Reconstruction is not being properly taught in schools. And it says from in the aftermath of the insurrection a year ago at the U.S. Capitol, many leading historians drew parallels between the violence and the Reconstruction era, the period of political revolution directly following the American Civil War. The events we saw reminded me very much of the Reconstruction era and the overthrow of Reconstruction, which was often accompanied and accomplished, I should say, by violent assaults on elected officials, said Eric Foner, author, a Pulitzer Prize winning historian and author of Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution. Reconstruction, America's Unfinished Revolution, 1863 to 1877. Now, he said this in an interview with the New Yorker magazine published a week after the January 6th insurrection. Scholars say studying the aftermath of the Civil War can help put into context many of the most seminal events in the U.S. in recent years, from the brutal murder of George Floyd by police in 2020, May 25th, 2020, when George Floyd was killed, Minneapolis, Minnesota, to the voter suppression laws enacted after African-American voters played a role in helping Joe Biden and Kamala Harris be elected president and vice president in 2020. Because you had these former Confederate states, especially pushing the big lie, pushing the lie that the election was stolen from Donald Trump, even after all the evidence came out proving that the big lie was a lie. But they still wanted to put these voter suppression measures into place to, one, suppress the African-American vote, two, suppress the Latino vote, Asian Americans, etc. But this was a power grab, okay? But this goes back to the voter suppression laws that we saw being put in place after Reconstruction ends, okay? And you have the rewriting of various state constitutions, like the Alabama state constitution rewritten in 1901. But despite the timeliness of the era in today's climate, many students in American schools will not get a full education on Reconstruction until they go to college. But many of them are not going to go to college. Okay, so a lot of them are not going to know this information. Check out this article here from Time Magazine. It's called "A New Report Finds That 45 States Are Failing to Teach Students About the Period That Shaped Race Relations After the Civil War." A new report finds that 45 states are failing to teach students about the period that shaped race relations after the Civil War. And then the article goes on to say, now this is from January 12th, 2022. Okay. A little more than a year after the January 6th, 2021 insurrection incited by the traitor-in-chief, Donald Trump. Now, this article goes on to say, in social studies standards for 45 out of 50 states and the District of Columbia, discussion on Reconstruction is partial or non-existent. Discussion on Reconstruction is partial or non-existent, according to historians who reviewed how the period is discussed in K through 12 social studies. Okay. Discussed in K through 12 social studies standards for public schools nationwide. In a report produced by the education nonprofit Zen Education Project, the study's authors say they are concerned that American children will grow up to be uninformed about a critical period of history that explains why full racial equality remains unfulfilled today. Okay, that explains why full racial equality remains unfulfilled today. So racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy. Okay, racism occurs when one race of people control the majority of the wealth, power, and resources, land, access to education, access to opportunity, jobs, businesses, etc. And they use that power to marginalize, subordinate, and do harm to another race of people. This is what racism is. Racism has nothing to do with calling people racial epithets, calling people the N-word, things like that. Racism is a power structure. Okay, so when you look at a history of laws and policies put in place that maldistributed wealth, power, and resources into the hands of Europeans, the end result of that history are the structural inequities that still exist to this day. And the racial wealth gap is one of those glaring examples of the structural inequities, the 8-to-1 racial wealth gap between African Americans and white people. Okay, the racial wealth gap does not exist because white people are 8 times smarter. Does not exist because white people worked 8 times harder. Okay, it exists because of the laws and policies put in place that maldistributed wealth, power, and resources into the hands of Europeans. One of those laws goes back to 1862. Okay, so yes, 246 years of slavery and African Americans largely not receiving any type of reparative justice to repair the damage of slavery. Okay, and not being given land, not being given any compensation, things like this, generally speaking. Yeah, but let's look at this here. Let's look at this specifically. Let's look at the Homestead Act of 1862. The U.S. gave away land for 124 years because of this law that dates back to the second year of the U.S. Civil War. Now, this is from history.com, official website of the History Channel. Homestead Act. How many people have heard of the Homestead Act of 1862? The Homestead Act accelerated settlement of U.S. Western Territory by allowing any American, including freed slaves, on paper, technically, including free slaves, to put in a claim for up to 160 free acres of land. However, this land overwhelmingly is going to go to white people. The Homestead Act of 1862, signed by President Abraham Lincoln, granted Americans 160-acre plots of public land for the price of a small filing fee. The Civil War era act, considered one of the United States' most important pieces of legislation, led to westward expansion and allowed citizens of all walks of life, including the formerly enslaved, women, and immigrants, to become landowners. So they gave away land for 124 years, okay, until it was repealed by Congress in 1976. They gave away 270 million acres of land for 124 years, and almost all that land went to white people, as opposed to it going to the former slaves who worked that land for free. Now you have tens of thousands of white families today that still have some of this land in their families, and it's been in their families for decades. Okay, so read the rest of this article here from history.com dealing with the Homestead Act. To make a claim, homesteaders paid a filing fee of $18, a $10 fee to make a temporary claim on the land, $2 for the commission to the land agent, and an additional $6 final payment to receive an official patent on the land. Land titles could be purchased from the government for $1.25 per acre following 6 months of proven residency. Okay, so read the rest of this piece here. Now, we largely get locked out of this land giveaway. Then you have the Southern Homestead Act of 1866, which gives away about 45 million acres of land. Then you have the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887 that gives away 138 million acres of land. Okay, let's continue here. All right, so we see the attack on the teaching of African-American history and the history of the civil rights movement, things like this in schools, but also during Black History Month. We see this attack because of these anti-critical race theory laws that were passed. And a lot of this has to do with, pushing the big lie. A lot of this has to do with pushing the big lie that the election was stolen from Donald Trump, and then the laws that were put in place after Biden-Harris took office, okay, in 2021. Well, if you look at this article here from Axios.com, new rules are limiting how teachers can teach Black History Month. We see Black History Month is under attack. Mock slave auction. Now, this is an article from USA Today. Mock slave auctions, racist lessons, how U.S. history class often traumatizes, dehumanizes Black students. Republican state lawmakers want to punish schools that teach the 1619 Project. This is another article from USA Today as well. So we go through and look at this history chronologically, and the Haitian Revolution is connected to Christopher Columbus in Spain conquering the island of Hispaniola, where in the western third of that island is where you're going to have Haiti, which is going to be a French colony, okay, Saint-Domingue. Now, the Louisiana Purchase of 1803, the U.S. gets 828,000 square miles of land from France, and this is going to double the territory of the U.S. at the time. The U.S. is going to carve out about 15 states from this land that they get from France. Now, France did not have a legal claim to this land. France steals this land from Native Americans and African people who are here. And one of the reasons that France is going to sell this land is because of they're going almost bankrupt. Napoleon and France are going almost bankrupt fighting against the Haitians during the Haitian Revolution in 1791 to 1804. And they're trying to raise money. So this is going to be a windfall for the United States. It's going to double the territory of the U.S., but also what it's going to do is the new territory that is going to have slavery, because they try to keep a balance between slaveholding states and free states, is going to increase the need for enslaved African labor in the new territories that are going to have slavery. Okay, so we look at this map here, we see the middle of the U.S. in the shaded in green. That is the territory that the U.S. gets because of the Louisiana Purchase. Then we'll look at the now. Let me go back to Haiti. Okay, there's a good piece from history.com. Britannica.com that deals with some history on Haiti. And it goes back to when the island of Hispaniola was conquered by Christopher Columbus. There's a piece on Haiti. It's about 26 pages because I printed it out. But there's a section that deals with early period in Haiti in history. So this is, I printed this out. It's 26 pages, made notes on it. So this is one of the sources here. This is one of the articles that we deal with in the class. But look at this here. From Britannica.com, Encyclopedia Britannica. Early period in Haiti in history. The island that now includes Haiti and the Dominican Republic was first inhabited about 5000 BCE, before the Common Era, and farming villages were established about 300 BCE, before the Common Era. The Arawak Indians and other indigenous peoples later developed large communities there. The Taino and Arawak group became dominant. Also prominent were the Saboni, C-I-B-O-N-E-Y, Saboni Indians, or Native Americans. In the 15th century, the 1400s, between 100,000 and several million Taino and Saboni lived on the island, which the Taino called Quisqueya. So Columbus called it La Isla Española, the Spanish island. That's what he called that island. And Haiti is on the western third of that island. The Taino called the island Quisqueya, which means mother of the earth. Mother of the earth, Quisqueya. They based their economies on cassava, farming, fishing, and inter-island trade that included gold, jewelry, pottery, and other goods. Italian navigator and colonizer and mass murderer and master of genocide Christopher Columbus sighted Quisqueya on December 6, 1492. December 6, 1492. And he named it La Isla Española, the Spanish island. Later, La Isla Española was anglicized as Hispaniola. Over the next few decades, the Spanish enslaved vast numbers of Taino and Saboni to mine for gold. European diseases and brutal working conditions devastated the indigenous people, which fell to about 30,000 by the year 1514. By the end of the 16th century, the group had virtually vanished. Thousands of enslaved people imported from other Caribbean islands met the same fate. The Spanish altered the landscape by introducing cattle, pigs, and horses, which multiplied into large herds. Spanish settlement was mostly restricted to the eastern end of the island and many Spaniards left Hispaniola after the main gold mines were exhausted. Okay, now 1514, this is 4 years before King Charles King Charles I signs the Asiento de Negros of Spain, King Charles I of Spain, also known as King Charles V. The Asiento de Negros of August 1518, which drastically expands the transatlantic slave trade, and it offers a license to other European countries or European slave traders to provide slaves to Spanish colonies. And it also has it also allows for direct transportation from Africa to the Spanish colonies, like in the Caribbean, as opposed to them stopping in Spain first and then going to the final destination. Okay, this is known as the Asiento de Negros of 1518, and this is going to drastically expand the transatlantic slave trade and the need for African labor as they're conquering more and more people's land, as they're killing off the indigenous populations there in the Caribbean. They have to bring in African slaves to replace this population, and this is going to enrich Spain, because the people that hold the European nations that are supplying slaves also have to pay for this license. They also have to pay Spain for this license, for this right to supply Spain with these African captives. It's known as the Asiento de Negros. How many people have never heard of the Asiento? All right, let's continue here. So French pirates in the mid-16th century, the mid-1500s, entrenched themselves firmly on Torture Island and other islands off the western end of Hispaniola. Subsequently, both French and British buccaneers or pirates held bases there. Permanent settlements began to develop, including plantations. In the 1660s, the French founded Port-de-Paix in the Northwest, and the French West Indies Corporation took control of the area. Landowners in Western Hispaniola imported increasing numbers of enslaved Africans, which totaled about 5,000 in the late 17th century, the late 1600s. Now, if we look at French colonial rule, plantations and enslaved people, the Treaty of Ridgewick, 1697, formally ceded the western third of the island of Hispaniola from Spain to France, which France is going to rename Saint Domingue. This is how Haiti becomes a French colony, when originally Saint Dominique was a Spanish colony. Originally, that was a Spanish colony. It's going to become a French colony. This is how it becomes a French colony, through this treaty of 1697. The colony's population and economic output grew rapidly during the 18th century, and it became France's most prosperous New World possession, exporting sugar, which is grown on sugarcane plantations, exporting sugar and smaller amounts of coffee, indigo, and cotton. By the 1780s, nearly 2/3 of France's foreign investment were based on Saint Domingue. By the 1780s, nearly 2/3 of France's foreign investments were based on Saint Domingue, and the number of stopovers by ocean-going vessels sometimes exceeded 700 per year. The development of plantation agriculture profoundly affected the island's ecology. Enslaved Africans toiled ceaselessly to clear forests for sugarcane fields, and massive erosion ensued, particularly on the steep marginal slopes that had been allocated to enslaved people for their subsistence crops. Soil productivity declined markedly in many areas, and formerly bountiful streams dried up. However, European investors and landowners remained unconcerned about or unaware of the long-term consequences of their actions, believing instead that an overpopulation of enslaved people was the key to wringing more profits from the region. So we can the political turmoil that we see in Haiti today, we can trace, you go back in history, we trace this back to Christopher Columbus in Spain, conquering that island nation. And then France taking control of that island. Let me phrase it. Spain conquering that island, making a colony out of it, and then France taking over the western third of the island, colonizing Haiti. Now, in 1789, Saint-Domingue had an estimated population of 556,000, including roughly 500,000 enslaved Africans. Okay, so this is the majority of the population there in 1789. Okay, under French control. This is 2 years before the Haitian Revolution begins. In 1789, Saint-Domingue had an estimated population of 556,000 people, including roughly 500,000 enslaved Africans, a 100-fold increase over the previous century, 32,000 European colonists, and 24,000 free mulattoes, people of mixed African and European descent, or blacks. Okay. All right. So read the rest of this. This is some of the information we cover here in the class. But this is at Britannica.com, early period in Haiti in history. Okay. Give us a thumbs up, give us a heart, give us a like on this broadcast. And this is just a preview of some of the information we deal with in this this new 10-week online course that I teach. Black Resistance Movements, 1492 to 1698, Christopher Columbus, Haitian Revolution, Black Power, how Black people fought back against white supremacy. And we look at a chronology of history, but something else very important that we look at in this class are the various ways that African Americans fought back. Now, when we look at Columbus, Columbus never came to the land that we call the United States of America. The closest he came here was Cuba, which is 90 miles away. So he never came to the land we call the United States of America. He goes into the Bahamas, Cuba, and Hispaniola on his first voyage that he set sail on August 3rd, 1492. His second voyage, September 1493, he goes into the West Indies and Puerto Rico, Puerto Rico and Jamaica, 1494. He conquers Jamaica in 1494. His third voyage, May 1498, goes into Trinidad and Venezuelan mainland in South America. His fourth and last voyage, May 1504, conquers Panama and Honduras in Central America. Okay, he never comes to the land that we call the United States of America. So we'll go through, look at history. We'll look at the U.S. Civil War, what leads to the Civil War. We'll look at the Reconstruction era, 1865 to 1877, Mexican-American War, 1846, 1848. And the Mexican-American War, as a result of the Mexican-American War, the U.S. is going to get the land that makes up California, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. And this is going to be, the U.S. gets this land in what's known as the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1848, which ends the Mexican-American War. And is going to increase the territory of the U.S. And in 1850, you're going to have what's known as the Compromise of 1850, which consists of 5 bills. And this is designed to organize the land that the U.S. gets from Mexico because of the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. And one of the things that the Compromise of 1850 does is allows California to come into the state as a free state. Okay, they abolished slavery and come into the Union as a free state. 1850, California. They're going to have about, estimates are about 4,000 semi-slaves from 1850 to about 1860. The California Reparations Task Force documents this in their report. Okay, but California does not have a deep history of slavery. But they do have California does have a deep history of racism, segregation, Jim Crow laws, fugitive slave laws, things of this nature. California does have a deep history of that. Okay. All right. So they will deal with things like the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 that allowed westward expansion of slavery into the Kansas-Nebraska territory. The Republican Party is going to be founded as a direct backlash to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. The Republican Party is going to be founded in 1854 as a direct backlash to this. Okay. So we're going to go through and look at this history and see how all this evolves. And we'll go through, look at this history chronologically. But more importantly, we're going to look at how African Americans fought back against what's taking place. There's going to be armed resistance. We're going to fight back through the cooperatives, like the Free African Society of 1787, the Colored Merchants Association in 1928, which was an association. It was a cooperative of African American grocery store owners. It comes out of the Negro Business League, founded about 1900 by Booker T. Washington, 1900, 1901 by Booker T. Washington. The Colored Farmers Union of 1886, the 1880s by in Texas, and that grows to 1.2 million members as well. Okay, so we're going to look at these various ways that we fought back against white supremacy. When we look at something, so number one, it's important for us to celebrate Juneteenth, commemorate Juneteenth, correct the history and protect the history of Juneteenth. June 18th, I was on Areva Martin's radio show. So if you watch CNN legal analyst Areva Martin, she also has a radio show on KBLA 1580 AM, which is Tavis Smiley's radio station. So she had me on her show on June 18th in 2024. And we dealt with Juneteenth was not the last day of slavery, repairing the damage of a legacy of slavery. It's on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep. You can go watch it. Fantastic interview. We dealt with a lot of history, but also we talked, there was some of the history of Juneteenth, but we also dealt with politics. So, because all of this is related, and your understanding of politics is directly related to your understanding of history and this chronology of history. I did a presentation for the Detroit Reparations Task Force, March 2nd, 2024. I have that presentation at our website. It's on our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. And one of the things we talked about in the presentation that I did was the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Okay, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is one of the reasons why you don't have a deep history of slavery in the Northwest Territory, including the state of Michigan. And this is a shock to some people, because you have a lot of people that just talk about, slavery, 400 years, things like this. But it's like, you have to, the history that takes place in America is a nuanced history. And just because you have 430,000 slaves in Mississippi in 1860 doesn't mean that's the same history all across the country. Okay, so if we look at this here, let me see something here. All right, here's the presentation right here. So I did this March 2nd, 2024 in for the Detroit Reparations Task Force. Let me try to expand that. There we go. All right. The Northwest Ordinance of 1787 is one of the reasons why Michigan does not have a deep history of slavery, as well as Detroit. And the Northwest Ordinance basically abolishes slavery in the Northwest Territory, which included Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Also, the climate in Michigan is another reason why you don't have a deep history of slavery as well. Whereas in Mississippi, so in 1837, Michigan abolishes slavery. Okay, Michigan abolishes slavery in 1837. And about 1832, Michigan, I think the number was about 23 slaves in 1832. And let me pull this up. Let me look at this here. Whereas in 1860, Mississippi had 430,000 slaves. The history of Michigan and Mississippi is totally different. So you can't, so you have to, especially when you do municipal reparations, you have to understand the city and state that you're talking about. Texas had 250,000 slaves in 1865. Okay, that's not the history of Michigan or Detroit. When we look at, let's see, Detroit in 1773 had like 73 slaves, and then in 17 and then in the 1780s they had something like, let's see here, what was that number? It was something like, okay, 1830 U.S. Census showed 32 slaves living in the Michigan Territory. Yeah, 1830 U.S. Census showed 32 slaves living in the Michigan Territory. Then 1782, there were 170 slaves living in Detroit. 1773, there was 73 slaves living in Detroit. Okay, so, but the Northwest Ordinance, if we look at this here quickly, at this is from the U.S. National Archives, archives.gov, U.S. National Archives. Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Officially titled An Ordinance for the Government of the Territory of the United States, northwest of the River Ohio. The Northwest Ordinance was adopted on July 13, 1787 by the Confederation Congress, the one house legislature operating under the Articles of the Confederation. The Northwest Ordinance, okay, so it's long story short. what this did was it basically abolished slavery in this territory, which is why Michigan had a very low number of slaves. Okay. A Bill of Rights, the third thing that the Northwest Ordinance did, a Bill of Rights protecting religious freedom, the right to a writ of habeas corpus, the benefit of trial by jury, and other individual rights. In addition, the ordinance encouraged education and forbade slavery. Now, the language from the 13th Amendment that dealt with involuntary servitude, that language comes directly from the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. There shall be neither slavery nor involuntary servitude in the said territory otherwise than in the punishment of crimes whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted. This is where the language from the 13th Amendment comes from. People think the 13th Amendment was written to re-enslave African Americans, things like that. No, that's not. That's not true at all. That's not the history. They're taking the language from the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 to create the 13th Amendment. Okay, so check this out here. Then we look at things like Project 2025, right? That Project 2025 has a historical context. I was speaking at a Juneteenth celebration on Saturday, I think that was June 15th, Jubilee Detroit, the Juneteenth Jubilee Detroit at the Joseph Walker Williams Center. And yeah, that was Saturday, June 15th, 2024. And it was a panel discussion dealing with politics. It's called Voting Vigilantes. It's on our YouTube channel. You can go watch it. It's on our Facebook page also. One of the things I talked about was Project 2025. Now, this is for Taraji P. Henson talked about it at the BET Awards. I'm glad she did talk about the BET Awards because more people found out about it. Okay, but what is Project 2025? The Presidential Transition Project explained. Now, this is from June 10th, 2024. Okay, June 10th, 2024. And this is from USA Today. Very, very good article from USA Today. And they talk about the detailed plan to dismantle and reconstruct the government laid out by conservative groups known as the 2025 Presidential Transition Project. Okay. Now, this is from the Heritage Foundation. The Heritage Foundation is a right-wing political think tank that crafts conservative policy. Okay. And Project 2025 has critics up in arms over its apocalyptic and authoritarian nature. Over its apocalyptic and authoritarian nature. The Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank in Washington, D.C., led an effort to create the more than 900-page Mandate for Leadership published in April 2023, reimagining the executive branch, and presented a plan to overhaul several government agencies, including the FBI, for the country's next conservative president to follow. Now, this is, I call this part two of what the Heritage Foundation did, because in 1980, the Heritage Foundation released Mandate for Leadership, which was a book that they released in 1980 that contained 2,000 policies that they wanted the Reagan administration to adopt. The Reagan administration adopted 64% of those policies in Reagan's first term. Okay, so, and that was called Mandate for Leadership, 1980. Project 2025 is called Mandate for Leadership also. Okay, this is part two. They're running a part two because part one worked. And a lot of people don't know that there was a part one called Mandate for Leadership. You didn't have social media in 1980. Now you do have social media, and millions of people are finding out about this. And what they're finding out about is like, oh, hell no, we don't want this. You have even some Republicans that are against it. This is for the MAGA Republicans, okay, like Hulk Hogan and Kid Rock. 900 and Candace Owens and Byron Donalds and Senator Tim Scott. 900-page mandate for leadership published in April 2023, reimagining the executive branch of the government, and presented a plan to overhaul several government agencies, including the FBI, for the country's next conservative president to follow. According to the project's website, the playbook provides a governing agenda and a lineup of people ready to implement it to, quote, rescue the country from the grip of the radical left. Rescue the country from the grip of the radical left. It includes a domestic and foreign policy agenda, a list of personnel training, and a 180-day playbook. Now, so the policies that they lay out to be implemented in Project 2025, they want implemented in the first 180 days of a possible Trump administration. What about the other 3.5 years? What are they going to do the rest of the 3.5 years? Quote, it is not enough for conservatives to win elections, end quote, Project 2025 said on its website. With the right conservative policy recommendations and properly vetted and trained personnel to implement them, we will take back our government. Take it back from who? The radical left. Who's the what radical left are you talking about? You're talking about policies that saved the economy and brought us out of COVID. What policies are you against? So they're against diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're against affirmative action. No Republicans support reparations. Project 2025's director is Paul Dance, who served in the U.S. Office of Personnel Management and U.S. Office of Personnel Management, Chief of Staff, and former President Donald Trump's administration. Because there are 140 people involved in writing Project 2025 that worked in the Trump administration. There were 140 people that wrote Project 2025 that worked in the Trump administration or are allies of Trump. Although it mentions Trump by name, the handbook does not directly assume the Republican Party's presumptive nominee will be the one to carry out its agenda. He's now the nominee, but it does not assume he will be the one to carry out its agenda. Okay, so the mandate attacks several policies from the former President Barack Obama and President Joe Biden. The mandate attacks several policies that former President Barack Obama and President Joe Biden instituted, including student loan forgiveness. They are against student loan forgiveness and the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare. It simultaneously calls for expanded executive power for the commander-in-chief, while criticizing what Project 2025 members perceive as overreaches by the Biden administration. Okay, so read the rest of this here. This is at usatoday.com. What is Project 2025, the Presidential Transition Project, explained? And this is from June 10th, 2024. This article is from June 10th, 2024. Now, I started talking about Project 2025 in 2023. That's when I found out about it, because this is the type of research that I do. So I've been talking about it since 2023, and I first found out about the Schedule F employees in July of 2022, and reclassifying the Schedule F employees. All right, so visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for this new 10-week online course that I teach. Black resistance movements, 1492 to 1968. From Christopher Columbus to the Haitian Revolution and Black Power movement, 1492 to 1968. We go through and look at history chronologically, and we look at how African Americans fought back against white supremacy and racism, the various ways we fought back against white supremacy and racism, understand these laws and policies that were put in place that brought us to where we are today, to understand where we need to go from here. So this class just started up. The next class is Sunday, July 21st, 2024, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Register for the class here. We have a course bundle where you get both courses that I teach, this course and the first course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Class number 1 of that class starts up Saturday, July 24th, 2024, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Okay. All right. Remember, right now it's correct. Wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you next time. We'll see you in class. Peace.